welcome pre-calculus students to the homework help video. Here's the assignment right here. Let's go ahead and get started with problem number 1. Go ahead and open your books to page 454. Have your homework out and your calculators and pencils, and let's see if we can't answer some of your questions for you. Okay, on the first problem here, I'm going to circle in red. We know two angles, this angle and this angle. So what I've taught you to do is when you know two angles, the first thing you do is you find this missing angle right here. So 30 plus 90 is 120. And then we subtract that from 180, and we're left with 60. So angle F has to be 60 degrees. Okay, easy enough. Now let's continue on. It really doesn't matter which angle you choose to circle. I'm going to circle the 30. I really have no reason to do that. If I go straight across, this is now my opposite side. I'm going to switch colors so it shows up a little better. This is my hypotenuse across from the right angle, and this is my adjacent side. Okay, so based on this 30 degrees, I can use sine, cosine, or tangent to help me find one of these missing sides. Now, I definitely don't want to use tangent because the tangent of 30 is opposite over adjacent, and that would give me two unknowns, d over f. So I can use sine or cosine. I'm just choosing cosine for the fun of it. There's no reason. So the cosine of 30 degrees equals adjacent, that's f, over hypotenuse 6. So there we go. There's my trig equation I'm going to use that will help me solve for f. Okay? Now, what I've taught you is whatever's in the bottom of the fraction, that's what you multiply both sides by because you want to get rid of this fraction. So I have a 6 in the denominator, so I multiply this side by 6. But I must also multiply this side by 6. On the right side, these 6's cancel, leaving me with f. And over here I have 6 cosine 30 degrees, and that's what equals f. So now with your calculator, make sure you're in degrees. You're going to type in 6 cosine 30 degrees, and if you do that correctly, you will get 5.2 rounded. So 5.2 equals side f. So 5.2. Now look, students, I know two sides now. I know this side and I know this side. So once you know two sides, use Pythagorean's theorem. Well, one of my legs is d, so d squared. My other leg is 5.2, so 5.2 squared. And then my hypotenuse is 6, so 6 squared. Well, if you square 5.2, you will get 27.04. And if you square 6, you'll get 36. And then, of course, we're going to bring the 27.04 over and subtract it from 36, make it a negative 27.04. And if you do that correctly, you will get 8.96. And then we take the square root of both sides. And we should get 2.99, which I'm going to round that to 3. So d equals 3. So there we go. Moving on, not too bad. So the three things we had to find was this angle here, and then this side here, and then this side here. Not too bad. All right, number two. Notice once again we know two angles, 90 and 45. So I'm going to go a little faster now. You have calculators, so let's use those. If you take 90 plus 45, you get 135. Subtract that from 180, and you will get 45 degrees. So just like that, I know angle A is 45 degrees. Now, I'm going to go ahead and use this angle, so I'm going to go straight across, and this would be my opposite side. My hypotenuse is right here, so we're going to call that hypotenuse, and this side over here would be your adjacent side. Now, you definitely don't want to use tangent, because tangent has opposite and adjacent, and that would be two unknowns, a over b, opposite over adjacent. So you can use sine or cosine. I'm going to use sine. So the sine of 45 degrees equals opposite over hypotenuse, a over 10, opposite over hypotenuse. Well, the bottom of the fraction is 10, so I'm going to multiply one side by 10, but I must multiply the other side by 10, and we come up with a over here because these cancel, and 10 times sine of 45 would be 7.1 So 7.1 for A. And now can I show you something that will save you a lot of time? Yes, we know two sides right here, these two sides. So we could use Pythagorean Theorem, correct? Sure we could. But I want to give you another thought. We learned that whenever a 90-degree triangle has 45 and 45 degrees, that means the two legs are going to be the same. So to save yourself a lot of time, now if you want to use Pythagorean Theorem, go ahead. You'll still get the right answer. But if this leg here is 7.1, then this leg here also has to be 7.1. They both do. And that's only going to be true in a 90, 45, 45 triangle. Your two legs are going to be congruent. Okay, moving on to number 3. Once again, we know two angles. So if I take 90 plus 67 plus 3, is it 67.3? I'm going to get 157.3, and then subtract that from 180, and I will get 22.7 degrees. So real quick, that was easy enough. I'm going to go ahead and use this angle. So I'm going to go straight across. This is my opposite side. This is my hypotenuse side, and this is my adjacent side. Now, your two unknowns. Do you see your two unknowns right here? Look, you don't know this side and you don't know this side. Those are your two unknowns. That's opposite and hypotenuse. So you don't want to use sine. Students, if you use sine, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. You'll have two unknowns. You can use tangent or you can use cosine. All right, that's totally up to you. Whatever you want to use. I'm going to use cosine, so I'm going to say cosine of 22.7 equals adjacent 126 over hypotenuse. C, that's cosine. Cosine of 22.7 is adjacent over hypotenuse. Now, watch what we do here. I'm going to go ahead and my bottom of the fraction is a C. My bottom is a C, so I'm going to multiply this side by C. And I'm also going to multiply this side by C. These cancel, and I'm left with 126. And over here, I'm left with C times cosine 22.7. Now I'm trying to get C by itself, and these two are multiplying, C times cosine. So I'm going to divide one side by the cosine of 22.7, but I must divide the other side by the exact same thing. So these cancel, and I'm left with C equals 126 over cosine of 22.7. Now if you type this into your calculator correctly, 126 divided by, and then hit cosine, and then type in 22.7 and hit enter, what you will get out for C is 136.6. So now I know this side is 136.6. Okay? Now, do I know two sides over here? I don't like this green color. I'm going to change. Yes, I know this side and I know that side. So I can use Pythagorean Theorem. L squared plus L squared equals 8 squared. Now, one of my legs is A, so A squared. My other leg is 126 squared. My hypotenuse is 136.6 squared. Now, there should be a plus sign here. Now, students, this is pre-calc class, and you should be doing well by now, so I'm going to try to save a little bit of... Almost dropped my calculator. Hold on 1 second. I am going to try to save a little bit of time here and not be lazy, but just, I mean, this is pretty easy stuff. Look, if I square 126 and square 136.6, I get a lot of big numbers. I'm just going to say this, okay? On your calculator, if you square 136.6, you will get 18,659.56. If you square 126, you will get 15,876. Bring over the 15,000, subtract those two, and you will get this answer right here. $2,783.56, and then take the square root of both sides, and you will get 52.8. So A equals 52.8. All right, so A is 52.8. All right, moving on to number 4. Once again, we know two angles. We know 26.7 and 90 degrees. So with your calculator, if you'll add those two angles together and subtract from 180, you should get 63.3 degrees. So I'm going to come up right here and I'm going to put 63.3. And I'm going to go ahead and use this angle. So I'm going to go straight across and I'm going to call this my opposite side. This is my hypotenuse. And this will be the adjacent side. Now, students, notice you do not know this side and you do not know this side. Those are your two unknowns, and they're called opposite and hypotenuse. So you definitely don't want to use sine, okay? If you use sine, you're going to have two unknowns. You're going to have t over s. So we're going to have to use, sorry about that, I apologize. Let me fix that real quick. There we go. So we're going to have to use something other than sine. So please watch what we do here. I'm going to use, I'm trying to think here how I want to do it this time. I'm going to use cosine this time. Hold on here. I'm actually going to use tangent. I have a reason. You could use cosine, and cosine is great. I just try to give you different looks at different types of equations. That's why I'm using tangent. So tangent of 63.3 equals opposite, which is t, over adjacent, which is 0.17. Now, students, look at the bottom of your fraction. It's 0.17. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 0.17. When I do that to the right side, these cancel. I'm left with t. And on the right side, I'm left with 0.17 tangent 63.3 equals t. T is already by itself. So with your calculator, if you will type in 0.17 and then hit tangent and then hit 63.3, you will get 0.34. 0.34 equals t. So I come over here to t and I call that 0.34. Alright, now notice I know two sides. I'm missing the hypotenuse. So we're going to use Pythagorean Theorem, 0.34 squared plus 0.17 squared equals hypotenuse squared. Now, if you take 0.34 squared plus 0.17 squared, add those two numbers together, you will get 0.1445 equals 8 squared. And now take the square root of both sides, and you will get 0.38. I'm just going to stop there, I think. 0.38 equals h. So there we go. 0.38. 0.38. Okay? So we've solved another triangle. Moving on to number 5. Okay, yes, once again, we know two angles. I'm telling you right now, on these problems here, I really don't want to have minutes and seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert, let me get my division sign here. I'm going to convert 42 degrees and 22 minutes over to 42.37, all right? So you can do that conversion on your own, or you can just trust me this is right. 42.37. All right. So now I notice I know two angles. I know this angle here is 42.37 and this angle here is 90. So I can add those two angles together and subtract from 180. So 90 plus 42.37 would be 132.37, and then subtract that from 180 and you will get 47.63. So 47.63. Now I'm going to use this angle, go straight across. We're going to call this our opposite side. Here's my right angle, go straight across, and I'm going to call that hypotenuse, and this side over here will be my adjacent side. Now, do you see your two unknowns? You do not know the length of the hypotenuse, and you do not know the length of the opposite side. So please don't use sine. If you use sine, you're going to have opposite over hypotenuse, which is p over n, which is two unknowns. So use tangent or use sine. Okay? Use one of those two. And I'm going to use today cosine, I believe. So I'm going to say cosine of 47.63 equals adjacent over a hypotenuse, which is n. Now, whenever I have an equation like this, I don't want this fraction, so I'm going to multiply this side by the bottom, which is n. But if I multiply one side by n, I must multiply the other side by n. So over here, these cancel, and I'm left with 23.2. And over here, I'm left with n cosine 47.63. And now divide both sides by cosine of 47.63. Now, of course, these cancel, and you're left with n equals, now look what n equals. N equals 23.2 divided by cosine of 47.63. You can type this in just like it is, students. You really can. Just type in 23.2, then hit divide, then hit cosine 47.63. And if you type that in correctly, for the letter n, you will get 34.4. Now that's a side, so it's not degrees. 34.4. Okay? Now, let's put that right here, 34.4. And now let's quickly use Pythagorean Theorem to find our last side. So we have 23.2 squared plus my other leg, p squared, equals 34.4 squared. Now, students, if you take 34.4 squared and 23.2 squared and get those two numbers and then bring this number over, you're going to be left with this right here, okay? You're going to be left with p squared equals 34.4, let's see. You're going to be left with 645.12. And now take the square root of that, and you should get p equals 25.4. So p equals 25.4. Okay? Very good. Let's moving on to number 6. Number 6. All right. Notice we have two sides again. You know what? I really don't want this minutes. I really don't. So I'm going to go ahead and change that over to decimals. 28 plus 34 divided by 60. 28.57. 28.57. So we know two angles. We know this angle and we know this angle. So let's take our calculators and real quick add those together. So 90 plus 28.57, and we're going to subtract that from 180, and we'll get 61.43. So this angle here is 61.43. So now we know all three angles. And now I don't care which angle you circle. I'm just going to circle this one. So this is going to be my opposite side. This will be my hypotenuse side. And this will be my adjacent side. Now, do you see the two sides that are unknown? Your opposite and your hypotenuse are unknown. So do not use sine of this angle. Sine will not work. Sine will give you out two unknowns. So what we're going to have to use is we're going to have to use cosine or tangent. Now I'm going to use tangent this time for no certain reason. So the tangent of 61.43 degrees equals opposite over adjacent. So opposite is h, adjacent is 17.3. Opposite over adjacent. Now, I don't like my fractions. My bottom is 17.3, or my denominator, so I'm going to multiply one side by 17.3. I've got to multiply the other side also by 17.3. So these cancel, and I'm left with an h. Over here I have 17.3 tangent 61.43. Now, all that I have to do is type this into my calculator, 17.3 times tangent of 61.43, and I will see that h will be 31.8. 31.8. Very good. So I come over here and I put 31.8 for side h. Now look what I have, guys. I know two sides. I know this side is 31.8 and I know this side is 17.3. So using Pythagorean Theorem, I can find that last side. So I have a leg squared, 17.3, plus a leg squared, 31.8, equals hypotenuse squared. Now, if you square the 17.3 and get a number, and then square the 31.8 and get a number, and then add those two together, I'm typing in my calculator right now, you will get 1,310.53 equals h squared, and then we take the square root of both sides. The square root of h squared is h, and the square root of this other number is 36.2. 36.2. And I think I used, you know what I did? I'm so sorry, guys. See this h for hypotenuse? We really should have made that an f. I'm sorry. That should be an f. It really should be. That's going to be confusing. It's an f. Because look, your hypotenuse is f, so I should have used f, and I apologize. Anyways, you will get 36.2. There we go. And that's for F. Very good. Moving on. Okay, now you're hitting a part in your homework where they just give you, if you'll look in your book, they just give you the information off the side instead of writing triangles over and over. So I cut and pasted there. Well, I kind of drew their triangle here. And in problem number 7, they're telling you right now that angle A, go ahead and fill this in if you want to, is 87 degrees and 43 minutes. So I'm going to very quickly convert that. 87 plus 43 divided by 60 would give us 87.72. So 87.72. And now notice we do know two angles. So I better finish writing everything in that we know. Also, they tell us that side A is 9.73. So the length of the side right here is 9.73. All right, now we know two angles, this one and this one. So with our handy dandy calculators, we're very quickly going to type in 90 plus 87.72, and then subtract that from 180, and you will get 2.28. 2.28. I've got to look and see if that's right. Okay, that looks correct. So this angle's 2.28 degrees. So I found angle B. Now notice for my sides I only know one side, so I'm going to have to use a trig function. I can't use Pythagorean theorem yet. So I'm going to circle this angle 2.28. Don't know exactly why, but it sounds pretty good to me. So I'm going to go across and we're going to call this opposite. Here's my right angle. We're going to call this the hypotenuse. And this over here is your adjacent side. Now notice your two unknown students are adjacent and opposite. Do you see that? Adjacent and opposite are your two unknowns. Sorry, that's wrong. We know letter A right here. I apologize. Your two unknowns are your opposite and your hypotenuse, so don't use sine. Whatever you do, do not use sine, okay? I'm going to choose to use cosine. Cosine of 2.28 equals adjacent, which is 9.73, over hypotenuse, which is C. Now, I don't like my fraction, and my bottom is a C, so I'm going to multiply one side by C, and I'm going to multiply the other side by C. When I do that, these C's cancel, and I'm left with 97.3. Over here, I have C times the cosine of 2.28. And of course, if I want to get C by itself, and C and cosine are multiplying, then I'm going to divide by cosine 2.28, divide by cosine 2.28. These cancel, and here's what C equals. C equals 97.3 over cosine of 2.28. Now students, if you type that whole thing into your calculator, you're more than welcome to. You would type in 97.3 divided by cosine of 2.28 equals, and what you will get for letter C on number 7 is 9.74. 9.74. So now we know that this side is 9.74, and we know this side over here is 9.73. Sounds like they're really, really close. Now we can use Pythagorean theorem very, very quickly. Okay, so I'm going to very quickly use Pythagorean theorem, and let's see if we can't do that. All right, one leg is b, so b squared. The other leg is 9.73 squared, and the other leg is 9.74 squared. Now, when you square 9.74 and get a number, and square 9.73 and get a number, and then bring that number over and subtract it to the right side, here's what you're going to get. 97.4 squared minus, excuse me, 9.74 squared minus 9.73 squared. I'm getting 0.1947, so b squared equals 0.1947, and now take the square root of that, and you will get 0.44. They're getting 0.39. We're going to be off a little bit because we've rounded our numbers, but 0.44. All right? For b. So the length of b is 0.44. And we've solved another triangle. Well, let's move on to number 9. Number 9. Okay, number 9, they tell us b, this side has a length of 100, and they tell us that c has a length of 450. Now notice in this problem we're given two sides. We know two sides. So let's find our missing leg. Let's use Pythagorean theorem, and let's find our missing leg. So one leg is a squared, the other leg is 100, 100 squared. The hypotenuse is 450 squared. Now if we square 450, we're going to get 202,500. And if we square 100, we're going to get 10,000. If you then bring that number over and make it negative, this number here, bring it over and make it negative, what you will get on this right side will be 192,500, and of course that equals a squared. So then we take the square root of both sides, and we'd get 438.7. So a equals 438.7. Let me check the book on that. And yep, they have 439, so they rounded theirs to simply 439, which is totally fine. Now, students, I gave you a note in your notes, and I hope you were listening. I told you that when you're missing, when you know two sides of a right triangle and you're missing the third side, the first thing you do is you find the missing side. We did that. Then next I told you when you only know one angle, and we do only know one angle, this one here. Oops, sorry about that. When you only know one angle, what you want to do then is you want to find the smaller angle first. And I did explain to you how to do that. Okay, so let's go over it again. We do want to solve for the smallest angle first. So the smallest side is 100, 450, 439, 100. This is the smallest side. So if that's the smallest side, you go straight across to the opposite angle, and that angle is the smallest angle. The smallest angle is always directly across from the smallest side in a triangle. So I'm going to use angle B for my trig function. So this side over here becomes my opposite. This side over here becomes my hypotenuse, and this side over here is my adjacent. Now, watch this carefully. I know all three sides, so it really doesn't matter what function I use. I can use sine, cosine, or tangent. I'm going to use sine. So I'm going to say sine of angle B, that's the angle I'm dealing with, equals opposite over hypotenuse. Now, students, please watch this. Look, here's my unknown. It's an angle. Anytime you're trying to find an angle that satisfies a trig function, you hit second and then whatever that trig function is. In this case, it's sine. So you hit second sine, and up on your screen will pop this. And then type in 100 divided by 450, and then equals. Now, students, the only time you use the second sine or second cosine or second tangent is when you're looking for an angle, and we are looking for an angle. So if you type this in correctly, then angle B is going to be 12.8 degrees. 12.8 degrees. And now look, guys, if we know angle B is 12.8 degrees, just add these two known angles up. Look, you know one is 90, you know one is 12.8. So if you add those two together, you would get what? 102.80, and then subtract that from 180 degrees to give you your last angle, and that should take care of it. So 7, 10, 9, this should be a 2, this should be a 7, and a 7, I believe. That looks pretty good. So 77.2. So angle A would be 77.2 degrees. All right? All right, moving on now to number 11. Just 3 left and we're done. Okay, number 11. They tell us that angle A is 47.58 degrees. So I'll write that right there. And they tell us that side C is 48.3. So 48.3. Now notice we do know two angles, this one and this one. So if we take 47.58 and add to that 90 degrees, and then subtract from 180, that third missing angle is going to be 42.42. So remember what I taught you. I told you when you know two angles right off the bat, you want to find that third angle first. So this angle here would be 42.42. Now, we don't know, we know one side, this side here. We do not know these sides. Now, I don't care what angle you use. I'm going to use this angle down here because I just feel like it. So I go straight across. This will be my opposite. And I'll go straight across here. This will be my hypotenuse. And then this will be my adjacent side over here. Now, notice my unknowns are A and B, opposite and adjacent. So please don't use tangent. Use anything but tangent, okay? All right, let's go ahead and start with sine. Sine of 47.58 equals opposite, which is your A, over your hypotenuse, which is your 48.3. Now, anytime you have a problem set up like this, you don't want these fractions. We're going to multiply one side by the denominator, but if you multiply one side by the bottom, you must multiply the other side by the same thing, 48.3. If you do this correctly, these cancel and you're left with A. And if you multiply all these together here, you could type into your calculator 48.3 times, or just type it right in succession. Just type 48.3 and then sine, then 47.5, enter. And if you're doing it correctly for A, you should get 35.7. 35.7. So side A right here is 37.7. Now, I'm ready for Pythagorean Theorem. I'm missing a leg, that would be b squared. I know a leg, that would be 37.7. And I know the hypotenuse, which is 48.3. Alright? So, squared, sorry. So if you square 48.3 and get a number, square 37.4 and get a number, and then bring that over and subtract it, you should end up with this right here. Let me grab my calculator real quick. 48.3 squared minus 37.4. And what I'm coming up with is b squared equals 934.13. 934.13. And if you then take the square root of both sides, we are solving for b. And if you do that correctly, you will get 32.6. Actually, I'm getting 30.6. We could be off a little bit again because we did do some rounding here, but I'm getting b equals 30.6. All right. 30.6. Okay, 2 problems left. Number 13. Let me go back. I don't think I finished that, did I? Let's see. I found all 3 sides. 1, 2, 3, and all 3 angles. Yep. Okay. Number 13. All right, they tell us that angle A is 35, and then B is 10. No, B is, sorry for yawning, I apologize, guys. B would be a length of 40. A length of 40. Okay? Now, we know two angles. We know 35 degrees and we know 90. Add those together, you get 125. And then subtract from 180, and you will get 65 degrees. So there we go. That's not too bad. Remember the note that I gave you. Whenever you know two sides, right off the bat, use Pythagorean Theorem and find the third side. Whenever you know two angles, like we did here, add them together, subtract from 180, and get the third angle. Now, I don't care what angle we go with. I'm going to go with this angle here. I'm going to go straight across. This is my opposite. Here's the hypotenuse, so the only side left is this side. This is going to be the adjacent side. Now, notice your two unknowns are right here, opposite and hypotenuse, okay? Do not use cosine. Cosine will give you two unknowns. Cosine of 35 equals opposite over hypotenuse. Do not use cosine, use something else. Or, excuse me, do not use sine. I apologize, I said that wrong. Do not use sine, use something else. So, I'm going to use the cosine of 35 degrees equals adjacent, which is 40, over hypotenuse, which is c. Now, I don't want my this fraction right here, so I'm going to multiply one side by c, the bottom of the fraction, multiply the other side by c. These cancel, and you're left with 40. Over here, you're left with c cosine 35. Now, notice the c and the cosine are multiplying, so the best way to get c by itself is divide both sides by cosine of 35. Very good. So now I'm left with c equals 40 over cosine of 35 degrees. Now, if you type that into your calculator correctly, c equals, what you want to type in is 40 divided by cosine 35, 13 letters c, you will get 48.8. So c equals right here 48.8, and so side c is 48.8. Now, we can use Pythagorean Theorem to find the last side. We'll do that really quickly here. So here we go. Let's see here. We're missing... Sorry about this, students. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay, well, that's fine. Let me grab my eraser here and erase this again. All right, and here we go. Okay, we know the, let's see here. We know c was 48.8. I think that got erased. And we know this side down here, the adjacent side, is 40. So I know one leg is an unknown, a squared. The other leg is 40, so 40 squared. And then the hypotenuse is 48.8 squared. Now, if you square 48.8 and you square 40 squared, and then bring this 40 squared, whatever number you get, bring it over to the other side and subtract. Let me type this into my calculator real quick. You should get 781.44, and then take the square root of that number, and you should get 27.95. So A equals 27.95, number 13. And let's see if that's right. Yep, they got 28 for the answer, so that's fine. We can put 28 if you would like to. So there we go. We know all three sides. We know all three angles. One problem left. So number 15. Here we go. Number 15, they tell us side B is 1.86. And they tell us C is 4.02. 4.02. Now notice right away we have two sides. We know two sides, so we're going to use Pythagorean Theorem very quickly to solve for the other side. So a squared plus 1.86 squared equals 4.02 squared. Now if you square 4.02 and 1.86 and then subtract those two numbers, in other words, bring this number over and make it negative, you will get this right here. Hold on one second, please. 4.02 squared minus 1.86 squared, and you should get 12.7008. So a squared equals 12.7008. And now take the square root of both sides, and you're going to get 3.56 for letter A. So A equals 3.56. So little a is 3.56. Now what I've taught you to do next is we're going to look for a missing angle, right? We're missing all three angles, we're missing two angles. So we've got to find our missing angles. Now, I've said you find the smallest angle first. So find the smallest side up here. That's this side right here. And then you go straight across, and that's the smallest angle, and that's the angle we're going to deal with. Okay, so circle B. This is going to be my opposite side. This is going to be my hypotenuse side. This is going to be my adjacent side. Now, it doesn't matter, since we know all three sides, it doesn't matter if you use sine, cosine, or tangent. I'm going to go ahead and use sine. So sine of angle B equals opposite 1.86 over hypotenuse 4.02. Now notice we're solving for an angle. Do y'all see that? We're solving for an angle. And when you're solving for an angle, you hit second sine and up pops sine to the -1, and then type in 1.86 divided by 4.02. Alright? And if you do that correctly for angle B, you will get, let me look at my notes here, 27.6. So this angle is 27.6. Now, we know all three sides. We know two angles. All we have to do is take 90 plus 27.6, add those two together, and you get 117.6. Now, if you take 180 and subtract from it 117.6 to find your third angle, you will get 62.4 degrees. And that makes total sense. If you take 62.4 plus 27.6 plus 90, you will get 180 degrees. I hope this video has been a help. I know this stuff can be challenging. I hope you're doing your homework, and I hope you're listening to the help videos to help you. Please continue to work hard.